What the hell happened in Libya? Let me try and explain to you in 5 minutes. In 2011, Muammar Gaddafi had been Libya's dictator for almost 40 years, and with protests spreading throughout North Africa and the Middle East, it didn't take long before anti-regime demonstrations erupted in Libya too. To quash the uprising, Gaddafi's forces killed 100 protesters in only a few days, which only provoked an even greater rebellion in cities like Benghazi and Misrata. Marching to Benghazi, Gaddafi vowed to cleanse the country of those protesters he called cockroaches. In response, NATO, led by France and the UK, had a resolution passed by the UN Security Council to launch a military intervention in order to protect the Libyan people from Gaddafi, particularly those in Benghazi. Now, while David Cameron had argued in March of that year in the House of Commons that the objective of any Libyan intervention would not be regime change, only a month later, Cameron signed a joint letter with the US and France stating that their collective pursuit would be a future for Libya without Gaddafi. The UN resolution was written in such a way to enable all necessary measures to be taken legitimately by NATO in order to protect Libyan civilians. And the UK and its NATO allies used this ambiguity to consider Libyan civilians only properly protected once Gaddafi had been removed. This mission creep, from preventing a massacre to overthrowing a government, was deemed without justification by the recent Foreign Affairs Select Committee inquiry into the intervention. In fact, it stated that Benghazi was properly secured only a mere 24 hours after NATO strikes on Libyan forces had begun. Instead, the intervention lasted 7 months, only finishing with Gaddafi captured and killed, and with NATO then declaring Libya liberated. At this point, 8,000 people, both combatants and civilians, had been killed in the conflict. The committee found that once Benghazi had been secured, there were still non-military political options available to NATO that could have been pursued and might have avoided bloodshed. In fact, the International Crisis Group, as well as various nations like Brazil and Germany, proposed one of these alternatives, but it was roundly rejected by NATO. Since the intervention, Libya has been in and out of a violent and chaotic crisis, with various rival governments now fighting for power and legitimacy. Now, there's no doubt that Gaddafi's dictatorship did repress basic civil liberties for decades, but since 2011, violent militias are now abducting, torturing and killing with impunity, and ISIS have set up various training centres in the coastal city of Sirte. Libya's destabilisation and lawlessness has enabled networks of people smugglers to operate much more freely, with thousands of refugees and migrants ending up dead or missing every year, having made the journey to Europe across the Mediterranean. The country is also now flooded with arms, following raids on Gaddafi's massive weapons depots, with many of these weapons now falling into conflicts in Mali and Nigeria. With perennial disruption to basic services like electricity and sewage, in 5 years Libya has tumbled in the development rankings, with its GDP almost halving. Of Libya's 6 million people, 500,000 are now internally displaced and 2.5 million now require some form of humanitarian assistance. As Barack Obama said earlier this year, Libya is now a shit show. The Select Committee found fault with the Cameron administration's decision-making at almost every stage. It found that the UK did not undertake a proper intelligence analysis of what was happening in Libya at the time before military intervention, nor could it even verify the actual threat posed by Gaddafi to civilians. The report suggests that looking at the available evidence, both of Gaddafi's history and the manner in which other rebel-held towns were being recaptured at the time, does not support the idea that Gaddafi would have massacred civilians. The report also found that the UK shirked its moral responsibility to help reconstruct Libya after overthrowing its government, stating overall that the intervention significantly caused the political and economic collapse of the country, civil warfare, humanitarian and migrant crises, and massive human rights violations. How was it then that a senior Tory, Bernard Jenkins, says that this whole episode reads horribly like a repeat of all the mistakes made in Iraq? Now, David Cameron did set up a new National Security Council early on in his premiership in order to formalise a thorough decision-making process for foreign military intervention, with Libya being the Council's first big test. However, the Council seemed unable to successfully integrate any meaningful check and balance into the government's decision-making. When Chief of Defence Staff Sir David Richards raised concerns about Cameron's strategy in Libya, he was reportedly seen as unhelpful. There might be broad consensus over the many calamitous mistakes made in Iraq. It's hard to see how any lessons are being learned to prevent repeating the same mistakes again. While Brexit might be David Cameron's defining legacy, it's hard to deny the spectre of a failed state on the Mediterranean also loomed large.